It's my pleasure now to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Malcolm McInerney. Malcolm's been involved in humanities education in South Australia as a teacher and manager in the Department of Education since 1976. He supported many humanities teachers through curriculum writing, the provision of professional learning across Australia. Currently, Malcolm, who I've met a couple of years ago, I work for the Department for Education as well, as you know, but Malcolm is currently the manager of the Governor's Civics Award for Schools program, and for many years has been the manager of the Premier's Anzac Schools Spirit Award prize. So today, in Malcolm's role in the department, he's going to talk to us about the importance of civics and citizenship education for young people, and also about his role in leading the work of the Governor of South Australia to award young people and to promote civics and citizenship amongst our school-aged children. So without further ado, I welcome Malcolm McInerney to share with us some really interesting information. Thanks, Malcolm.
Okay. Thank you, Heidi. I'm so pleased to be here today to have the opportunity to talk about something which I think is very important. That is students, just like we saw with Samoda, involved in our community as active citizens. I'd probably be lying if I said every student in our schools are equally as active as citizens. And my aim is that we have students aware of what our society's like, but also act on it and actually be active with it. So about a year ago or less, I was at Maitland Area School, and one little young child, year 6, asked me a question: what is the difference between him and him? And I thought, what a good question, excellent. But then I started trying to answer it, and I realised actually to answer that, you need a lot of civics understanding. The difference between the Governor and the Premier. And after I sort of muddled through an explanation and saw the young child's eyes glaze over, I realised that you can't explain it without that knowledge, without some background about civics. And I could have equally said, what's the difference between that chap and that chap? And again, I'd have to go to a whole different level of understanding. The interesting thing, if I put up a picture of the past president of America, they'd know. They'd actually know quite a bit about that chap, which does worry me. That maybe we know more about the machinations of which happen in social media, where they learn a lot of this, than they actually understand about our own state and federal system. Another really good thing which happened last year was that an article appeared in the Victorian papers, and is actually in 2019, where Students Victoria, actually the Student Representative Council of Victoria, asked a question. I don't know who to vote for. I don't know this gear. I'm not taught this information. I haven't got the knowledge to be an informed citizen. And it was really interesting, and from that the Victorian Premier at the time, I think it was Dan Andrews at the time, initiated a program to develop civics and citizenship to a greater extent in Victoria. So that was an interesting trigger. We have a similar trigger here in South Australia, but interesting enough, that trigger came not from the students initially, it's actually triggered from the Governor. The Governor of South Australia had a similar question. He had the question of, how much do our young people actually know about my role and about the role of government in our society? And he talked to the Minister, Minister Gardner, and out of that came the Governor's Civics Awards for Schools, which I'm going to talk about today. But before I go into any detail on that, I want to just pose a few questions to you as an individual. I was a little critical of young people then, other than Samoda. Was I being fair? Because what was my civics knowledge when I was 15? I had a fair bit of knowledge about cricket and other things, but what was my civics knowledge? And I challenge you to think about, what was your knowledge as a 15-year-old, or an 18-year-old, or a 20-year-old? So we've got to be careful of being too critical of the young people today. The second question is, how much education did you have at school on civics and citizenship? I didn't have much at the school I went to. I knew more about kings and queens of England than I knew about civics. So are we actually talking about something which has been happening in our schools for a long, long time, that maybe we haven't taught some really fundamental information? The next question I pose to you, all of you are highly educated people about civics and citizenship now, working in Rotary, and I know you would know who those chaps were. But you know, I showed you that picture to some friends who I thought were quite civics minded the other day, and not one of them could identify David Hurley as the Governor-General of Australia, which I thought was interesting, where they all knew about Cosgrove. But David Hurley, just on Australia Day yesterday, did make some interesting statements as well. So maybe they will know now. But where did you gain your knowledge? From the media? From self-interest? Interest where you started reading? From TV? From colleagues? And the final question, how extensive is your knowledge in that area now? Not making any judgments about it. But you know, I learn new things every day related to civics and citizenship. And that's the area I'm working in. The other thing I just wanted to point out really quickly, we have a declaration of, at the federal level called, it was the Melbourne Declaration, which was launched at the MCG in 2008. But the latest one, which is very similar to the Melbourne Declaration with a few changes or additions, is known as the Alice Springs Declaration. And in that, it quite clearly says one of the aims of education is to make all young Australians active and informed members of the community. And I think we'd all agree that's an important thing. I often get asked, what's the difference between civics and citizenship? Because it's two names, two words, surely they are different. And I'm going to talk a little bit a while. Does it really matter how much civics we know? Does it really matter how many members of parliament there is? Or is the key word citizenship, about being involved in our community and doing things in our community? But to do many of those things, do we not need to have some knowledge about the structures and functional areas of our society? So I've just put that up. I'm not going to read it to you, but I just thought it'd be interesting. Another interesting bit of research which has only been done, I'm going to talk about that in a little while. Don't worry, I'm not going to read this document, but I just brought it up to say, have a look at this one day, is that for young people, they're turning away from mainstream media and learning most of their civics knowledge, some of what is flawed, through social media or other areas of information. It needs to be objective learning, it needs to be accurate learning, and maybe they're not getting it where they should. I've used the term powerful knowledge, and I know we in education are notorious for jargon, but it's a bit of jargon I really like, because powerful knowledge is knowledge that we do not osmotically acquire by just living. It's knowledge that we, at some stage, need to be taught. Because otherwise, why do we go to schools? Why do we go to school? Would we have learnt mathematics without being taught mathematics? Would we have just acquired it by living? I think civics and citizenship is also a powerful knowledge, that there is some knowledge, foundation knowledge, that we should have as citizens. And if we don't have that knowledge, can we be active and informed citizens? Now, this document I held up a little while ago is called the National Assessment Program, Civics and Citizenship. You've heard of NAPLAN, where we test literacy, numeracy. There is also national testing on civics and citizenship. It's random, it's sample. So we pick randomly classes all around Australia and we ask them questions about civics and citizenship. And this is the report that we find out. It's a really interesting reading, some of which is disturbing, some of which is really surprising. Here's one of I'm actually on the setting panel for this, so we have great fun saying, is this a civics question or a citizenship question? And the arguments nationally are quite interesting. But a civics question, I've just put one of those questions up there for you, and all of you would have no trouble answering that. But that's a year, what one's that, a year 10 one, I think. We talk about proficiency. Across Australia, only 30% of Year 10s could answer that question. Is that a problem? I'm talking nationally, not South Australia. I'm being politically protective. But nationally, only a small 30%. And here's this type of citizenship question, which are scenario questions. Like, what would you do? Why do we do these certain things in society? Why do we have petitions? What can petitions be used for? They are citizenship type questions. Again, very low. Only 38% across Australia is their proficiency in these questions, meaning they were answered correctly. The state that does the best is New South Wales. The state that does the worst is Northern Territory. I shan't tell you all the others. But 38% is not good. The other part of the national testing is the concerns. We ask students, there's an attitudinal, there's a survey. What things worry you most? And 5 years ago, it was things like terrorism. But the things now students say that worry them most are climate change, environmental change, and pollution. They dominate. Terrorism seems to have dropped off the radar for the moment, which is a great thing. If we did the testing now, maybe pandemic would be up there as something which they're concerned. But this testing was done before the pandemic. I've left my acknowledgement of country until now, and I acknowledge the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the land. I've left it to now because acknowledgement without knowledge is possibly not acknowledgement. So we need students to know some things about our land, our people. And one of the really heartening things from the national testing is that very high numbers of students have a positive attitude to, number one, multiculturalism and contribution of migrants, and also the need to acknowledge the First Nation people. The other thing was a really positive attitude to fundraising by young people, which I think must resonate with yourself. Interesting enough, the motivations differ from primary to secondary. The testing's done at Year 6 and it's done at Year 10. And we get an enormous amount of really interesting information, some of which contradicts to what we may think young people think from what we read in the media. This is much more accurate. I'm just putting up some information, and I know we've got a very short time, but this is really important data. These are when they're quiet and very interested in civic issues, what's happening in the local community. Year 6 are much more interested. There's a drop-off. Other things happen during adolescence, which stop students maybe being as interested in certain things. Global issues, 74% of Year 6 people, young people, were interested in it. Another bit of testing they do is about trust in civic institutions. And we've watched, again, the United States and the incredible distrust of civics institutions which have occurred in the last couple of months. But what about in Australia? Did we know this information? And year sixes have more trust in civic institutions. It decreases by year 10, and I wonder if we did the same surveys at with university students, what it'd be, or if we had other surveys in the community. Do we know this data? It's not census data, they're not questions we ask, but they're really important questions that we should know. Citizenship behaviour. They thought the following was very or quite important. Support political parties, 76% dropping again in year 10. So this is just a bit of a taste of the depth and richness of the data that you can get online. You can download that. Don't print it off like I did, but I wanted to wave it around. It's a really interesting document and it's worth having a look at. Just Google National Assessment Plan, Civics and Citizenship, 2019. We do have a citizenship curriculum. I'm known as the HAS person, not an avocado. Humanities and social sciences. And humanities and social sciences is history, geography, economics and business, which is another neglected area, I would suggest, and civics and citizenship. And all students, during their schooling, should have access to this powerful knowledge. It's taught compulsorily, it should be taught from years 3 to 8. There is a year 9-10 curriculum, but that is up to the school if they want to teach it. So it's compulsory over 3-8. So if you've got grandchildren, children, relatives, ask the students what they're learning about civics and citizenship at school, because they should be. I haven't got time to go through the curriculum now, but I can talk about it's made up of government and democracy, law and citizens, and citizenship, diversity and identity. That's what we're trying to teach. So I've already posed that question to you. The lower house in South Australian Parliament, the House Assembly, 47 members, each representing a separate electorate. We all knew that in here, didn't we? Yeah. Excellent. You do now. If you went out in the public, and I did this once, a survey in Rundle Mall, as part of my job, asking people, did they know that? And they don't. Many people don't, including my fellow educators. But the point I'm making to you, does it really matter? Does it really matter that we know that basic fundamental civics knowledge? And I haven't got an answer to that. But as a teacher, I reckon we should know some of it. Does it matter? The civics and citizenship understandings do matter. So what we've done a lot of work on in the last couple of years is say, okay, we've got all this knowledge, but what are we really wanting students to understand? These are the concepts or understandings of civics and citizenship. And if you haven't got these, can we be an informed, active citizen? I'll just run through them really quickly. First one, governance. Second one, social order. Third one, I could ask you what do you think that one is? Equity, the famous poster I made, I put up. Next one, what's that? Diversity. I think that's pretty important. Justice, that's important. I used a geographical example, but it's about contention. Not everything is black and white. We want our students to argue, discuss, but not off the top of the head. We want them to argue and discuss with knowledge which is informed and objective. And the last one, I couldn't find, I should have taken a picture probably of Australia Day yesterday, the concept of citizenry, of being part of a citizen group. You know, the French talk about fraternity, is about citizenry. So having said all that, that's what we want students to understand, and hopefully they'll get some really basic knowledge. I have 1 minute to go. Am I going all right? Oh, good. So can I talk about the Government Civics Awards? You've got the brochure. As I've told you, the genesis of it, concern, and the Governor is really very, very involved in this process. Everything I do, I pass Government House to check that he's happy with it, and the Minister, of course, because we want the best program to do all of those things I just talked about, and hopefully get our proficiency levels up from the average across Australia of 38%. In fact, I do worry about other states, but we want South Australia to be up above New South Wales, don't we? in good old Federation rivalry, which we've seen wonderful things of that in the last year. The basics of the program, it runs from years 5 to 12. It's across most of schooling. We have individual categories, group categories and school categories of awards. And there's no big prize. There's no trip overseas like is an Anzac prize. They get to go to Government House to meet the Governor. They get a lovely gold medallion. But it's about recognising them as young people who have thought about civics and citizenship. And they're thrilled by that, as I think all. The primary ones were actually, I don't know if any of you were at Proclamation Day at the old Gumtree this year, but we awarded them at the Gumtree with the Governor this year, which it was a lovely symbolic thing to do. So in that brochure you'll see the categories. And again, I emphasise, if any way you can help promote this with us, please do. Because with all awards in schools, schools are busy places, teachers are busy people. We've got to stop them and say, hey, civics and citizenship is more important, no, it's not, is as important as STEM. Now, I've got to be very careful what I say. I'm an evangelist for humanities education. Literacy is important. Gosh, if you can't read, you can't get the knowledge. STEM's important. We want, we want medicine, we want those things. But surely being an active, informed citizen is fundamental to our existence as a society. I often talk about environmental sustainability in my role as a geographer, but in this role, it's about political sustainability. We saw that only 2 weeks ago in Washington. Political sustainability is fragile. So we want our students to know these things. So if you can help, there's the awardees of the old Gumtree on Proclamation Day. And if you can, promote it, support it in some way, and if you've got anyone in your orbit, get them to enter in the Governor Civics Awards, and congratulations for entering, Simota, and winning, being one of the awardees. So thanks for listening to me, and thanks for having me today.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. I know there'll be lots of questions there for some of our members and guests. So we've got about 5 minutes. So I think David Seaton has the first question for you.
That's a very interesting thought.
Thank you.
I think as a grandparent, and once as a parent, I would be very concerned to make sure that the instructors and the instruction are completely, absolutely neutral and without bias towards one side or the other of, say, politics. Can that be guaranteed through your program?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, in the department, there is a guideline, a rule, law, whatever we want to call it, that we are not to proselytise, and that goes with politics too. We, as teachers, and I teach at the university, and I teach student teachers going to be will be humanities teachers, and I say, look, it is not your job to pass on what you believe on a topic, what your politics are. In fact, politics is what you believe, but you've got to make sure you are objective and you're not there to push your wagon. Now, I guess it happens, but it is not to happen. And certainly these awards have been, when you read that brochure, they're very much, there is some givens. This program, the Australian curriculum, quite openly, is supportive of multiculturalism. So it's not the right of a teacher to get up and say, I don't believe in multiculturalism. You may not, some of you may not believe in certain aspects of those types of things. But in education, the Australian curriculum for civics and citizenship openly is supportive of diversity, multiculturalism, and of course of now acknowledgement of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That is part of our curriculum. Curriculum is political, no matter what, as we know from Nazi Germany what they did with the curriculum. So teachers are not just, they should not pass on what their views are. And that's our policy, and in fact, if someone did that and were reported, they would be chastised for it because it is wrong.
Thank you. Thank you for the very interesting talk. That last diagram you showed, which had the segments of the program you're offering, it seemed to me that it was missing history. It does seem to me that it's very difficult to understand our civic construction without having a good understanding of where we've come from.
Okay, it's a really good point. History is the basis. You'll see down the left-hand side of that brochure, I show the focus. We are bound by the curriculum, and South Australian history is taught in Year 5. Federation and national history is taught in Year 6. World War I is taught in Year 9. So the point is, we've had to link into the Australian curriculum, or our curriculum, that is mandated to be taught in our schools. This is a Civics and Citizenship program. We have our separate history program where these things are taught as well. So HASS, Humanities and Social Sciences, is history, geography and civics and citizenship, economics and business. So that history work should be covered in other year levels as part of the history curriculum. So we have, in Year 5, 6, I have linked history into this program because I agree with you 100% as a history teacher. You're nowhere without history. Yeah.
Sorry, it might be a little bit, so when you describe these things are very much on a national level or a state level, at least the perception that you gave today. But isn't for most people, isn't the local level much, much more important? Like who fixes your potholes in the street, who collects your trash, who builds your local youth center? That is for most people a much bigger issue in their lives than who is the government general. So it's like how much of civics should be about local, kind of like the local environment, not necessarily about state or federal or international.
Absolutely. Look, if we had time today, I would have gone through the curriculum for civics and citizenship, and quite clearly in that it is the levels of government, and there's quite a lot of work done on local government, the role of local government. We haven't built it as much into this program as we could have. And don't forget, this is only the second year of the program, so we're still tweaking it. The group category, though, in this is the ones that get awarded are groups and schools who do things in their local community. So they are the ones where that local activity is based. You know, they might be a group that goes and sings in nursing homes in an area, or they've been awarded for amazing things over the last couple of years. So yeah, you're right, and it is there. But of course I'll say that, but it is there.
Malcolm Mack. My name is Malcolm Mack also.
Oh, what a good name.
And in ages past, I was superintendent for areas geography, history, and the social...
Oh, Mr. MacArthur. Oh, so long.
How difficult it is sometimes to involve kids in areas like this because it doesn't seem immediate.
No.
But I've got a further concern.
Okay.
I spent 6 weeks once in the States looking at some study of history of any place in the world except the United States. And in 6 weeks, I found one school in Detroit. I found colleges, but no schools with any exploration of the world beyond American society, because that's mandated for all schools. How do we maintain this understanding of the local situation and an involvement in the wider world, in a globalised world?
Yeah, and I'll be lovely to see you again. I haven't spoken to you since 1984, but God, I feel old. But the
you've got the year exactly right.
It's dead right. Yeah, I know. But in Year 10, a lot of work's done on globalising in the curriculum, but it's not compulsory. It's compulsory up to Year 8. So if you're not in a school that's not doing Year 9 and 10 civics and citizenship, you miss out on it. So you've made a critical point, and yes. My Churchill Fellowship I did that in America too, and I was exploring geography, and 90% of the teachers I was working with didn't have a passport because they said, "Oh, everything you can see is in America." So we can't be like that. You're right. I hope there's no American people here. because they're wonderful people. Yeah, all right.
Okay, stay here.
Thank you.
I've got to say thank you.
All right.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. But what an interesting conversation you've sparked. Thank you so much. I'd like to also acknowledge my appreciation to Malcolm for inviting me as a Department for Education employee in engagement and wellbeing, but I also wanted to do this as a Rotarian, to be on the reference group and the judging panel for these awards, and it's been a wonderful opportunity and experience for me to see how the young people in South Australia are doing such wonderful things, but we really need to get more young people involved so that we can really showcase some of the great things they're doing. So thank you, Malcolm. If you'd just like to stay here, we'd like to thank you in our usual way. So if everybody could please stand and thank Malcolm for his work and his presentation today. And Malcolm, as a recognition of your talk today, a donation will be made on behalf of the Rotary Foundation to help mitigate polio, but also COVID-19 from the world. We will have a certificate for you, and we will post that out to you shortly. So thank you very much, Malcolm. Thank you. And I invite Trish back up to close the meeting.